You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
I have a picture somewhere of the first Halloween costume I can remember wearing, picking. And it's a very old picture, early 70s. I must be 4 years old, and I'm dressed as a ghost. And I can remember years later my mother telling me how she made the costume out of cloth diapers. So, yeah, it's a fantastic costume. And if you look at the picture, and I will try to find it, I look like I'm in the Klan. Like, it's a terrible costume. It doesn't look anything like a ghost. It looks like a little boy dressed in white sheets. It's terrible. I cannot believe my mother sent me out or took me anywhere dressed as that. But you have to understand, in the time period that I grew up, making your costume was what you did. That was what you did for Halloween. And the next big memory I have of Halloween must have been 1976. I was 5 years old, and I went as Rocky. So I had the shorts, the gloves, the satin robe, and blood on my face with like some purple for a bruise. This is before I had anything to look up to, any characters. You know, Rocky was fine and all, but not what I was into. And it must have been a case where everybody was excited about this movie coming out, because I don't think the movie had even come out yet, but there I was, a boxer, a generic boxer, Rocky, on Halloween night. And not really my thing, you know. I'm not really a Stallone fan, so I'm not sure where that came from, other than it's what your parents want for you, right? But, gosh, when I was a kid, and starting at age 6 or age 7, probably 7, because Star Wars took a year to take off, really, for merchandising. So starting from age 7 on, nothing else mattered but Star Wars. And for Halloween, I was always Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader or whatever I could get my hands on. I remember taking a toilet paper roll and wrapping it in foil to be a lightsaber to hang on my belt, because they made all those toys, but the lightsaber is always lit. And I was like, no, Luke wears it on his belt. He doesn't always have the sword out, so I wanted to be authentic. So even back in the day, I was going for realism. And this is back when, I know it's going to be hard for anybody younger to even understand, but Halloween's only taken off in the last 15 years or so. When I was a kid, it was a blip. It was a blip, one-night affair. They put out Halloween stuff in the store maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the event, if that, and the night came and went, and that was pretty much it. This explosion of how big Halloween has gotten is a modern thing. Back in the day, it was every kid's rite of passage to go to. For me, it was Save-On, which isn't even around anymore. It's now CVS. But back in the day, it was Save-On Drugs, and Save-On had a huge Halloween aisle. And what that meant was they had all those boxed Ben Cooper costumes. They came in a box with the folded up jumpsuit and the plastic mask on top. And they were stocked sideways, so you just read on the side who it was. So whatever assortment they got, your mother said, pick your costume. Because if you weren't going to take the costume that your mom made for you, you were going to have, 10 minutes in the store to pick what you wanted. So it's like, oh my God, I'll pick this one. And it's always, for me, it was Darth Vader. I had Darth Vader, Stormtrooper, C-3PO, and then later I had Yoda and Admiral Akbar, Boba Fett. They even made an R2-D2. And this is, again, the jumpsuit that doesn't look like the costume. It's a jumpsuit with a picture of the character on it in like a sunburst, Star Wars logo, Darth Vader's picture, and then a Darth Vader mask. And that was your Halloween costume, unless you were going to make it. Now, remember, I like to make authentic ones. So every once in a while, I would get a cape and make a chest piece out of cardboard with foil on it, and add the Darth Vader mask to that, and not wear the jumpsuit, and actually just make my own costume. So I was very big into that. And as a kid, you waffled between Christmas and Halloween being your favorite. Now, Christmas was the big day, especially for Star Wars kids, because that's when you got your major bulk of Star Wars toys. But Halloween was good because you got to be the Star Wars character. And that was very important for our generation. We wanted to live the Star Wars lifestyle. And going to get that costume was such a rite of passage. And there were other stores like, I know CVS has, they probably have a Halloween section now, but it's all that generic stuff. Nothing really exciting. But back in the 70s, early 80s, they were the place to go. Sears. I mean, people don't even go into Sears anymore. And Sears used to have a huge pop-up Halloween shop with the greatest assortment of Don Post masks anywhere. And any kid would just... Gosh, if your mom was going to the mall and you could get to Sears during Halloween, you saw the creme de la creme of masks, the Don Post series, man. And I didn't get an actual Don Post Darth Vader helmet till I think it was 82. So I didn't have it during my big Star Wars years, because that's an expensive purchase. That's hey, do you want all the figures in a playset or a vehicle, or do you want the mask? And it's like, oh, geez. Eventually I've got all the figures. I'll take the mask. So getting a Halloween costume was as important then as it was now. It just was more difficult because there weren't as many choices. Now you go and the Halloween costume selection is part of the movie, TV show, cartoon promotion. Like, of course they're going to have a costume for every single character you could possibly imagine. The sad part is that for the most part, the quality, I mean, it's gone way down. And for a guy talking about jumpsuits with pictures on the front, that's saying a lot, because some of the costumes, like, they're just sad looking. Have you seen the Rocket Raccoon costume from Guardians of the Galaxy? I can't imagine any kid wanting to wear that. You're going to get laughed at. But as a kid, then, now, today, yesterday, it doesn't matter. Halloween's a great holiday. You get to dress up, you get to be something else, you get to be a hero or be a monster or be intimidating and go out into the neighborhood and get as much candy as you can get in the allotted time. And gosh, when I was a kid, it really did look like that scene in E.T. where they go out and it's just kids everywhere. That's what I grew up in. And where I live now, there is a little bit of that. There is a lot of kids who trick or treat. I know in a lot of cities, it's gone downhill, which is unfortunate because the urban legends of the staple and the Tootsie Roll and the razor blade and the apple, they never happened. And if they did, they were from someone the kid knew. There's never been a case of a stranger handing out tainted candy. Oh, I'm sure somebody will point out one or two. But enough to destroy and dismantle the whole trick-or-treating apparatus? No, sir. No, sir. Trick-or-treating is a rite of passage. Staying up too late to fill your pillowcase with candy is something every kid looks forward to. It is one of the highlights of childhood. And that's why so many adults go out to parties and dress up to elaborate costumes, because who wants it to end? Everybody wants to dress up. I'm lucky because I work at a theme park event for Halloween. So my Halloween lasts 3 months. It never ends. At least it doesn't feel like it. But, yeah, gosh, those 70s Halloweens were the greatest, and putting costumes together. And eventually, I did grow up out of the Star Wars stuff and moved on to dress as a few monsters. Always desperate to get that Don Post mask. I can't say enough about what Don Post meant to my generation. Like, it just was like, that's what you strive for. The masks were the greatest. God, I used to get Fangoria and Starlog, and in the back, they had an ad for a collector's edition facehugger or Nosferatu with hands, and they were like $450, $500 back in 1979. That's a lot of money. They show up every once in a while on eBay and such, but I'll never be able to afford it, ever. There's also a mask that I have wanted since I could read, and that's Sargoth the Cobra. What a cool mask. It's just a big snake head. And, I just wanted to put that on with a robe and just be the most terrifying thing you've ever seen. And the way my wife now has a phobia about snakes, I could live that dream if I could afford the mask. But even a damaged one goes for $300 or $400 on eBay. Never going to get a hold of it. When I went to Scare LA this past summer, somebody had, the first time I've seen them in the flesh, the reproductions of the Dawn Post Halloween 3 masks. And those are so cool. Like, talk about, I've talked in past about wanting to make the movie tangible, and gosh, doesn't that just make Halloween 3 tangible with the Silver Shamrock theme song, 4 more days to Halloween. The movie's weird and crazy, but it's a cool movie. We just watched it not too long ago because it's such an oddity. And you know me, if you've listened to the podcast, I love odd films. And to take Halloween 1 and 2 and go, okay, that's the Michael Myers story. Now we're going to tell a new story. I really wish people would have supported Halloween 3 so that we could have gotten a different anthology movie for a few years. But alas, it was not to be. But I'm here to talk about some Halloween weirdness and a true story. And it's very strange. And it begins with a list of victims. And we're going to talk about in the late 70s, we're talking 79 to 80, Southern California was terrorized by a serial killer. And it's weird to think that forensic science has gotten so good that a serial killer has to be very crafty now to get away with what they're going to get away with. And these people are crafty, They rarely catch serial killers who are dumb. Most of them are very intelligent. Now, I can't speak for the one I'm going to talk about, other than to say that the freeway killers were well known in Southern California. Like, we were warned of them because these guys were going after young boys. And the reason they got the name the reason he got the name the freeway killer, we're talking about William Bonin. William Bonin used to pick up boys. He would incapacitate them. He would do terrible things to them. And then he would kill them. And he would dump their bodies on the side of the freeway. And that's how he got the name the freeway killer. Now, there were actually more than one freeway killer working independently, but this was the most prolific. 21 victims between May of 1979 and June of 1980. That's a heck of a run. And I wouldn't think anything of it. Like anybody, serial killers are mildly fascinating. I don't exalt them. I think they're monsters. I think if you murder somebody, you deserve to die. That's just the way I feel. My father was murdered. My father was gunned down in a robbery. I will talk about that in a later episode. Not the victim of a serial killer by any means. Just an idiot. But I don't have any sympathy for people who take lives. Here in California, we have the death penalty, but they don't put people to death very often. And they may never again. But at least William Bonin, who was tried and convicted of being the freeway killer, was executed in about 96. So he's not on this earth. And when you talk about 21 victims, you talk about 21 lives extinguished and how terrible that is. And they ranged in age from 13 to 18. And that's just terrible. And one of them is unnamed. They never found out who it was. And how tragic that is. And what must it have been like for those families to first have their son disappear and then have their worst fears realized when the police come to your house and tell you, the body's been found and they've had terrible things done to it. Like, this is the worst horror stuff you can imagine. But what does it have to do with me, you're probably asking? Well, my brother's older than me, and he's nearly a decade older than me. So we lived in different generations. And my brother got in with a group of guys, a bunch of guys, and they were all pretty smart. They were all very intelligent, but they smoked pot and they did a lot of other drugs. So they didn't, as they say, live up to their potential. But in 1979, they decided to get together and build a haunted house. And it was 2 streets behind where we lived on Studebaker in Norwalk. And this thing was the toast of the town. Like, this was a huge thing. I've tried to look online for any kind of newspaper article or, a TV thing would be the greatest. But I can't find anything. And it's maybe because I'm not putting in the right keywords. But my brother and his friends worked on this for weeks. And they really went above and beyond anything of the day. And the line for this thing stretched around the block. Now, since it was my brother, we didn't really have to wait in line. So we were there just for the festivities. And I can remember, even though I was only 8, I can remember my mom being very proud of my brother for having done this thing. And this was a cool haunted house. They had found a house that let them use almost the entire interior. So it was a real tour through a haunted house. It wasn't a let's build walls and do a haunted thing. No, it was more like they found an empty house and they inhabited it for the month and opened it on Halloween night. And they were all, like I said, they were all very smart. So they had Pepper's ghost effects. They had lighting effects. I can remember they had built a chessboard, and the pieces were moving by themselves. All really cool stuff. Stuff that you walk through and were like, wow, this is impressive. And they had, you walk through the backyard, and they had dug graves. And they weren't like, we dug a grave. No, they dug like a 6-foot grave. And I can't remember if there were people jumping out or skeletons or what. I was only 8. But it was all really amazing and really cool. And like, wow, if we can't get to the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, this is the next best thing. And what made it even more impressive for me was they knew the lines were going to be long. So they had costume characters to entertain people while they waited. Now, how cool is that? Now, the costume characters they had a Jawa from Star Wars with light-up eyes. Now, every kid of my generation wanted to be a Jawa for Halloween because we were the right height. We were kids. But how do you do the light-up eyes? Like, I don't know how to do that. You got to go to Radio Shack and get LEDs, and you got to attach them to a battery. Like, I didn't take electronics shop at 8, so it wasn't in the cards. But these guys had done it. They had a Jawa with light-up eyes, and in the dark, man, this was the coolest thing. And they had a Darth Vader. They had a giant 6-foot-tall plus Darth Vader with a light-up chest piece, and he breathed, and he was menacing, and I was in awe. Oh my gosh. It was my dream to meet Darth Vader. Now, the weird thing is, I don't have any pictures from that night, which is odd to me because my mother took a lot of pictures of us as kids, and this certainly was a picture-worthy event. And maybe she did take pictures, and maybe they went somewhere. I don't know. But I'll never forget Halloween 1979 because that haunted house was cool. In addition to getting candy and trick-or-treating, and I'm sure I was dressed as Luke Skywalker, we also got to see Darth Vader, and he was just the coolest thing ever. And this was better than the Darth Vader I had seen at Gemco. That was a kind of cheesy one. This Darth Vader looked great because he had lights on him, and he'd stepped out of the movie. So I just wanted to be with Darth Vader all night. And Darth Vader ended up somehow putting me on his shoulders. I don't know if he took his helmet off, or I was like, look, it's uncomfortable, but I will find a way. But I ended up riding around on Darth Vader's shoulders. And this was a childhood victory. Oh, wow, win. You know, I wasn't going to get to meet the real Darth Vader or anything that, like, I wasn't going to make the trading cards I had come to life. Or the story of Star Wars storybook that when R2-D2 beeps, turn the page. No, this was Darth Vader, 2 streets behind my house with a Jawa. This is the most awesome event ever. And that Halloween went down in the record books because it just was so much fun, so involving, so engrossing. And it might have been what gave me a lifelong love of Halloween and wanting to, a few years later, make my own haunted house with the doors that the Drunks stole. If you've listened to the Drunks episode, I built a haunted house out of doors, and Halloween just was so much fun. I did a haunted house in elementary school. We did it on the stage, and I convinced one of our faculty members to do this haunted house. I just remember that being the coolest thing ever. And then in high school, instead of doing a play one year, we did a haunted house, and I helped put this thing together and cast it and come up with the rooms. And Halloween just has become the most exciting holiday ever. And this is before Halloween was sort of taken over by the sexy costumes, you know, because I listened to Dan Savage's podcast, and he's very astute when he says that Halloween has become heterosexual Pride Day. You know, we have a gay pride, but heterosexual Pride Day, because that's the day when all the heterosexual girls dress up in sexy costumes and like, look at me, look at me. And guys are supposed to dress up in costumes that enhance their masculinity. I'm a soldier. I'm a ninja. I'm Thor. I'm Captain America. And the girls are like, I'm a sexy ketchup bottle or whatever the hell it is. No, I'm talking about Monster Halloween, you know, where you watch monster movies in the day and get ready for the big event at night. And Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, and the ghost in the invisible bikini, which I've seen 1,000 times. Like, oh, Mad Monster Party. Oh, man, Mad Monster Party. You know, Nightmare Before Christmas. Before Nightmare Before Christmas was Mad Monster Party. I loved all of this stuff with Halloween. I used to get the Dawn Post catalog sent to my house. Halloween has always been so important to me. And can I trace it back to that Halloween night in 1979? Yeah, probably. Because it was such an impact that, look at what my brother did. My brother and his friends worked hard, and they created this alternate reality in this house where when you went in, the forces from beyond had taken over. You know, and that's cool. And I get to do that in my job now. You know, I get to work on Halloween for weeks at a time. Gus and I and everybody at Knott's have been working on Trapped since last November, off and on, and making it as best we can. So Halloween's in my blood, so to speak. And you can imagine our surprise when in 1980, so a year after the big haunted house, not quite Halloween, but late summer, we get a visit at my house from the FBI. The FBI knocked on our door, and he wanted my mom to gather my brother and all of his friends because he needed to talk to them. Now, I was there that night, and I can remember it vividly. Everybody huddled around in my living room while this very important man laid out this story. And the story was, and this is one of those things that for years in my family, this was the story, one of the stories. And if you've listened to my podcast at all, you know that my family has a lot of stories. This was a decidedly different one, because this is not something we ever set out to do. This is when evil was visited upon us. And what happened was the FBI guy opened up his briefcase, and he took out a picture. And he said, "Do you guys recognize this person?" And everybody said, "Yeah, that's Vern. That's Vernon. Vernon Butts. Vernon Butts, yeah." And Vernon Butts, the FBI guy said, had just been arrested. And he'd been arrested because he was an accomplice to a serial killer. Vernon Butts and William Bonin were the freeway killers. And everybody got real quiet. And you could almost feel a chill go through everybody. Because Vernon was the guy who helped build the haunted house. And my mother got real pale because Vernon was dressed as Darth Vader that night. Vernon Butts, a serial killer, was the guy who carried me around all Halloween. Like, this was not a joke. So the FBI guy questioned everybody. And the questions I remember the most were the ones, obviously, that he asked my brother. And he said, have you ever gone to Vern's apartment in Downey? My brother said, yeah, we've been to Vern's apartment. Me and my girlfriend Donna have been to Vern's apartment. He said, well, what can you tell us? Well, Vern was a weirdo. They knew there had been incidents of Vernon Butts running around town in a vampire cape and vampire teeth and trying to bite women on the neck. But it was all seen as a joke, like the guy's just an idiot. But when they went to his apartment, Vern had a coffin. Vern slept in a coffin sometimes. And when he wasn't sleeping in it, sometimes he put his phone in there. So when the phone rang, you had to open the coffin to answer the phone. Now, the FBI guy confirmed this. And again, this is all just a story passed down from my mom and my brother through the ages. And it was really weird. And the FBI guy got really serious. And he said, you only went over to Vernon's house with your girlfriend. My brother said, yeah, I always had Donna with me. He said, if you'd ever gone over there alone, you'd be dead. Oh, my mother almost lost it. My brother got real quiet. And the guy said, I'm being serious. Vernon and William Bonin preyed on lone young boys, hitchhikers, people they knew that they got alone. Now, they made a cheesy movie about the freeway killers. I don't recommend watching it. But you can see a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I'll try to post some videos because it's chilling. Like, all these young boys that they killed and how close my brother came to being one of those victims. And the idea that this guy carried me around on Halloween is just, it's chilling. And we were all scared. And this is before they had, I don't think they had even all the victims rounded up. Like, they didn't know who had killed, how many they had killed. And there was talk of an ice pick being used in one of the guy's ears and terrible mutilations and the bodies being dumped like garbage on the side of the freeway. And everybody in that room, my brother and all of his friends, like, this was the most serious thing that had ever happened to them. This was pure evil. The freeway killers were pure evil. So when William Bonin was executed, that was a good thing. Now, Vernon Butts never made it to trial. Vernon hanged himself in his jail cell using a towel. Now, we all thought that was fishy because we knew Vernon. Vernon was very tall. Like, again, he was Darth Vader. So the idea that he hung himself on a towel rack, we think somebody got to him. We think Bonin sent somebody in to get him because Butts was going to turn evidence on Bonin for a sentence that wasn't the death penalty. At least that's how I understand it. Again, this was a family story passed down, and for years, I wasn't sure what to believe. Did it really happen? Am I remembering it correctly? If you've listened to any of the other episodes, you know that I remember things pretty vividly, and this is something you don't really forget. But I got a book at the thrift store, and it's called Without Remorse, The Story of the Woman Who Kept the Los Angeles Serial Killers Alive. And it's a story of this woman named Vonda Pelto who acted as sort of a counselor for the guys on death row. Now, this woman was one-on-one in offices, with these guys unchained. Vernon, not Vernon because Vernon died, but William Bonin, Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, among others. And she would tell you in the book what they were like in their cells versus how they were in the real world. And when she got to the freeway killer section, I was reading this book in the middle of the night, and it got to the point where William Bonin is recruiting Vernon to go out and kill with him. Like, he's like, hey, I do this cool thing on the weekends, and I think you'd enjoy it. You should come with me. And they talked about Vernon's apartment, and they mentioned the coffin and the phone. And I'll tell you what, I got a chill down my back, because here was third-party in-print proof that the family story was true. That Vernon Butts, a serial killer, had carried me around on his shoulders, and the FBI was there. He had pictures of things that he showed around, and he told that entire group of young people they were all lucky to be alive, that this guy would have killed any of them without a second's hesitation. Happy Halloween indeed, right? Like, I just find that so weird, I find it so strange. First, I find serial killers so bizarre because I'm not a violent person. I don't understand that instinct to want to hurt somebody or want to kill somebody, and to get a thrill out of it and want to do it more than once and over and over and over. Like, that's, to me, it's inhuman. It's just inhuman. And when I look back on that Halloween, I just have all these weird emotions. Like, I wish I could interview my mom right now and just ask her, like, what was going on? Were you crazy? Like, this is a woman who in one fell swoop could have lost both her sons. Now, I wasn't in their age bracket to molest and kill, but hey, they could have made an exception, right? Because I'll tell you, if Darth Vader had told me to get in the van, I would have gotten the van. I would have thought it was this TIE fighter. We were going to the Death Star. Well, we would have been going to the Death Star, right? But what a weird thing. And to think that it was 2 streets back, and this guy was in our circle of friends. Vernon freaking Butts. Freeway killer. Sick, sick, sick. And it wasn't it wouldn't be the end of the serial killer nonsense, because I also lived in the same neighborhoods where Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was roaming in the late 80s looking for victims. And they didn't ever really have an MO on him of how he was choosing his victims. And at one point, I swear to God, the news reported it was pink houses by the freeway. Well, that's where we lived, in a pink house. My mother painted our house pink at some point. So I was terrified. From 1979 on of serial killers, and not in a irrational way either, in a totally real way. Oh my God. Well, I hope you enjoyed this shorter episode of a true chilling story of the freeway killer who dressed as Darth Vader. We'll be back our next episode with something a little lighter, something a little different, and not so dark and dreary. I'm heading to Kamikaze this weekend. I can't wait. In one fell swoop, we end Halloween Haunt at Not Scary Farm in a big bang, and I'll go to Kamikaze in the same day, and that'll be a lot of fun. And we're going to see Elvira at Kamikaze and then at Not Scary Farm, so a double whammy. Come out to Not Scary Farm and say hi. I'll be at Trapped every night until, starting tomorrow night through Saturday. And if you listen to the podcast, let me know. I'd love to say hi. I know we have listeners around the world, and you don't really quite know what I'm talking about, but that's okay. I'd like to thank my friend Robbie for his great review on iTunes. I didn't credit him last week, but I did talk to him, and it was indeed his review, so I'm very excited about that. And he told me, he's going to seek out Ford Fairlane simply because I talked about it. And isn't that what podcasts and media are supposed to do, to help you discover something new? How cool is that? And I hope that you, the listener, have discovered new things to look at based on the garbage that I talk about. Maybe now, I mean, if you're Googling the Freeway Killer, I'm sorry, because it's not pleasant. But they do have plenty of stuff on Wikipedia where I got my list of victims and such. But the story is true. Didn't change a word of it. And it is frightening. And I'm thankful that it's just a family story of what could have been instead of what happened. But as you go out this Halloween, trick-or-treating or partying, whatever you do, take a look, because you never know. You never know who's under that mask and what they're up to and what kind of creatures lurk right next door. I'm Jeff Tucker, and this is 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?